Nigerians react to President Buhari's New Year broadcast, say it gives hope for national progress and development.
Believe on him. When we believe in him and we know that what he said, he will do it.
Former President Ibrahim Babangida calls on Nigerians to value diversity rather than use it against each other.
Tears and grief as unknown gunmen killed 16 in Rivers State while a traditional ruler and his wife are murdered in Kaduna on New Year Day.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, our focus is on 2018 economic outlook for Nigeria. Thank you very much, Cliff, for that background report, and that, of course, would now set the tone for our discussion on the economic outlook for Nigeria in 2018. It's a pleasure, as always, to have us being joined by a former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Dr. Obadiah Melafia. Thank you very much for coming on Good Morning Nigeria today.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
Same here. All right, and also would also love to welcome to our studios a retired professor of political. He's also a political economist. He was a former senior faculty lecturer in the Department of Behavioral Science at the Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio, USA, and was also a consultant with the United Nations Economic Commission in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And he is Professor Ebere Onwudiwe. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
All right, let's take our conversation to Maiduguri Network Center, and from there we're being joined by Mr. Kyari Bukar, who is the chairman, Nigeria Economic Summit Group. Mr. Bukar, thank you very much for joining us from Maiduguri.
Thank you, Claire and Rhoda. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. And of course, let's go to Lagos. We are being joined from there by Dr. Ayo Teriba, a familiar face on Good Morning Nigeria. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Economic Associates. Mr. Teriba, thank you very much for joining us. And gentlemen, would like to welcome you, of course, with a Happy New Year. Greetings. We do hope that you had a wonderful holidays, celebrations. So let's get the ball rolling with, of course, Dr. Obadiah Melafia. Before we begin to look at the economic projections for 2018, let's rewind and do a little bit of assessment of the economy in 2017. Now, NBS, of course, I said there's been a steady growth. We've moved from, the second quarter, ending third quarter, as our correspondent did say, 1.4% growth rate, as against 0.8% IMF projection. How do you see the economy in 2017?
Well, the economy, I think, reached that level where the recovery could be said to have been reached a sustainable level. The previous years were very difficult. 2015, 2016 were very difficult. We were largely facing negative growth. For the first time in 2017, we entered a phase of positive growth. Some of the indices looked quite good. Unemployment seemed to have fallen a bit. The review also showed that inflation came down from over 19, almost 20%, to about 17%, down to almost 16%. And agriculture showed some improvements, and rice production and the rest of it. We are seeing a lot of progress in that area. So the fundamentals were much better than the previous years. So I would say that yes, it gave us cautious reason for cautious hope that, this year would even be better. But, as they used to say in Brazil, the economy is doing well, but the people are not doing well. This is really where I think also government need to address some of those issues. That for ordinary people, ordinary Nigerians, life in 2017 was very, very tough.
So cumulatively, what's your assessment? Good or better or?
I would say, well, better than previous 2 years. Better than previous 2 years. But there's a lot of hardship. A lot of people, middle-class people, have been laid off from the banks, from manufacturing firms, and the rest of it. Young people finding it difficult to find jobs, and you top it with petroleum scarcity and the rest of it. Many Nigerians are living lives of quiet desperation. You may wear nice clothes and put on a good smile, but there has been a lot of hardship, and I think we need to address those issues.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Obadiah Lafia. Professor Onwudiwe, what's your assessment of the economy in 2017?
Well, it was a lot of hardship in 2017. The recession was there. And I think that the greatest thing going for 1917 was very pragmatic. 2017
Nice.
was the very pragmatic policies of the central bank. You recall that the set of policies that they started with was quite protectionist, and a lot of free marketing economists, including myself, were very much opposed to that kind of protectionism. But it worked. And so it really emphasized the local production and took on the issue of forex that was cumulatively able to pull us into the positive territory.
You just said something now that these were, for you, policies that you were against at first, but then it worked.
Yes, it worked. It did work. I mean, we did get out of the recession. That's evidence of it working. And but at the basis of the theory of free market, it was not good to start protectionist policies, which many other countries do. Because why I called their policies why I called it pragmatic was that even though they know this theory, they really, really thought that this is what the economy needed at this time. And we can't be importing things that we can make here. And I think that was a very, very important step to take in pulling up the economy.
All right, let's bring in, of course, Maiduguri, Mr. Kyari Bukar, who is the chairman, Nigeria Economic Summit Group. If you look at the growth rate projection for 2017, that's the outgone year, we had projected a 2.5% of GDP against a benchmark of 42.5, of course, barrels per dollar. And the year ended, of course, with, positive growth. So how do you see, did you make progress to your expectation?
Yes, Claire, it's a mixed bag of activities when one considers 2017. Now, of course, naturally, I would also go along with what the professor said. Both personally, and by the way, this is mainly my personal views, NESG still has not released its own assessments and projections. But what I have said, what I've seen that has happened, getting us out of the recession, two elements played a role. One is the fact that oil prices went up, which actually it means that the oil sector really grew much faster than the other sectors. And the other is obviously the stability of the exchange rate and some bit of foreign investments that came in through the INE window. I personally is also a free market economist, fundamentally speaking. However, the pragmatic position of the CBN played a significant role in addressing some of the issues. Had we done flotation in 2016, we would have gone through the shocks and we would have come out of the recession much earlier. However, I think it's kudos to the CBN. The other thing that I really wanted to lay emphasis on is that when you look at the way we got out of the recession, it was a bit sluggish. And there is the fear and concerns that, especially what Dr. Melafia mentioned and what some other analysts have brought in, that is that there is a fear possibly of even double dip recession if we are not careful. And of course, the sector was driven primarily by two sectors, one agri and the other being the oil and gas, which we have been saying as a nation we need to diversify ourselves out of oil. So the agri sector played a significant role, and since I'm talking to you from Maiduguri, you can kind of adduce that I'm originally from there, and this is one of my sojourn towards the end of the year every year that I come and spend at least 3 to 4 weeks here. Now, there is an economic bustle going on, so there is a mini boom going on in the metropolis. However, it's something that has to do with, of course, the general successes in agri, even though because of the Northeast disturbances, we haven't seen a lot that have gone into farming, but the few that have, the products that have come out of the farms have been well marketed, and so that has some level of impact on the economy. The other thing that I would also put across, based on these are just anecdotal facts coming from the Northeast. The Northeast Development Commission, even though it hasn't taken off, there is a lot of buzz and goodwill as a result of what Mr. President had put in place with the signing of the Northeast Development Commission bill. And we hope that we get the right sorts of professionals that would come in and drive in the reconstruction going forward. So 2017 had been a mixed bag. We have successfully, albeit slowly, gotten out of recession, and the rest of the things that would move forward are issues like the FX rate, which is stable, fairly speaking, but the other thing is the inflation rate. And we have seen the easing of inflation rate month over month, I believe, for the last 8 or 9 months. And if that continues, we might even see the monetary policy somewhere in the middle of the year or towards the end of the year beginning to ease, and which is something that I also very strongly believe that with an expansionary monetary posture, we would see a lot of growth that would impact people directly. So those are some of my quick takes on the 2017 year. Of course, we can talk a lot about other things, but I believe that as a year, 2017 is far better than 2016, and hopefully we will see a quicker response of growth from 2018 onwards. And the other thing is the budget. The budget in 2017 did not get passed until much later in the year. This year, however, for the 2018, that is, the budget was submitted by Mr. President in the first week of October. So hopefully by end of January, we should have a working budget for the 2018 financial year. Those are all things that, one may think they're not very important, but to me they are significantly very important in an economy where government expenditure, especially capital spending, has a trickle-down effect for the rest of the economy.
Thank you very much for the points you've raised. And let's also get the views of Dr. Ayo Teriba from our Lagos Network Center. Now, exiting recession has been widely celebrated. You listened to the president yesterday talk about it. Nigerians have also been talking about it. But of course, it's an economy in 2017 that was largely driven still by the oil sector. The non-oil sector contracted, from the second quarter growth rate of 4.5% to minus 0.76%. Again, as Mr. Kiari talked about the budget implementation and all that, what are your concerns with regards to the kind of growth that we made in the economy in 2017?
Thank you very much, and good morning. Right, well, 2017 very largely was a year, in contrast to 2016, was a year of a string of good news, following the string of bad news that 2016 seemed to have been about slipping into the recession, about the devaluation, about inflation doubling, about reserves reaching a low of $24 billion, all in 2016. And this time last year, at the beginning of 2017, we were all very, very anxious, in particular about the exchange rate and the fact that, the economy, remained in recession. So it's good news over the course of 2017 that month after month, good news, kept filtering in. The Naira strengthened from February. Inflation, as Mr. Kiari has said, inflation dropped steadily over the past 9 months, and the economy exited the recession. Yes, we can speak about, the whole economy is out of recession, but the latest figures showed that much of the growth reflected the improvement in the oil sector, both price and output. I would say that I have no reservations about the fact that while oil sector grew very strongly, the non-oil sector still struggles, to grow. In that the non-oil sector relies on the oil sector for the supply of forex, and the recession in the non-oil sector was a reflection of the shortage of the forex. So a recovery of the oil sector will impact positively on the non-oil sector, but with a lag. So perhaps we need a bit of patience. I expect that from the fourth quarter and the successive quarters of this year, that improvement in the oil sector would rub off on the non-oil sector, and the entire economy, oil or non-oil, is most likely to perform better than we had seen, in the third quarter.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ayo Teriba. Lots of positives, gentlemen, from the non-oil sector, from the oil sector as well. These are the things that have driven the growth that we have seen so far. But then there are already lots of projections for the year 2018. We've seen the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, saying that, there will be a growth of about 1.9%. The World Bank is saying about 3.2%. Fitch is saying, a leading world is saying, we're seeing about 2.6%. But Dr. Begayami Lafia, what is your projection for 2018 with all of these indices that we're seeing right now?
Well, yes. Fitch of London, the ratings agencies, have said we're likely to grow by about 2.3%. The IMF, something pretty similar. I think that we should be optimistic. We might get up to 2.5. It could even reach 3%, depending on what we're able to do. Now, let me correct one impression. The oil sector hasn't grown significantly. It has not really grown much. When people talk about the growth of the oil sector, I'm sure they are referring to simply the fact that oil prices have increased. And the Niger Delta boys have stopped their shenanigans. So, the production is taking place. That is really, there has not been any major investments. There have not been new oil finds. Nobody has invested heavily in the sector for which we could say that, significant growth has taken place. We're just lucky that oil prices have improved to about $65 per barrel, and production has been going on steadily. That is just the simple explanation of this thing. But going forward, my projection is that growth will remain steady if we pursue prudent policies and continue in them. I have taken exception with, for example, high interest rates. I still think the MPR is still way too high. We should work towards significantly reducing it because we need real sector financing. This is where the jobs will be created. When the real sector, manufacturing and other key sectors have the kind of, especially for SMEs, have the kind of funding that they need in order to build their businesses and to create jobs in the future. This is really what we need.
All right, Professor Ebere, you listened to Rhoda, the different projections that have come from international financial institutions. The World Bank is saying we're likely to do 1.9%. IMF is saying 2.1%, and Fitch is giving us 2.6%. Now, I'm wondering what could have triggered the variations in these projections?
Well, even Moody's, that
Yes.
was hard on us the last time,
Yes.
is now positive. So the enthusiasm is not only coming from these rating agencies overseas, but I've seen cameras since yesterday, Nigerian television cameras, going to ordinary people, asking them whether they think next year will be better than this year. And it was great exuberance, everybody. And that's not based on any analysis, but it's based on faith. It's perhaps the New Year effect. But I don't know if I'm going to have specific numbers attached to any projections, but I join the whole enthusiastic atmosphere of the economy going onto the growth path in the years ahead. I think that the best hope can be based on the growth of the non-oil sector. Because, you see, it is not that the Nigerian economy is not diversified, as so many people say. It is that the source of revenue for government is not diversified. It is mostly hinged on oil. And that's why I wouldn't call it, my friend Malafia, I wouldn't call it shenanigan, what is happening with the militants in Niger Delta. Because the argument can be made that it is because the militants allowed it. It is because of the federal government's approach to the militants that allowed the increase in the volume of oil that was sold. That's what sustained us, and that's actually what took us out of the recession. Of course, there were increases in oil prices, but without the militants working with without the federal government working with the militants, and I give the vice president a lot of credit on this, the negotiation, the quiet negotiations that allowed oil to continue to be produced, not disrupted, is what produced the volume of forex that allowed the central bank to use it to intervene, stabilize the naira. And that's part of the whole positive things that happened to us. So I wouldn't diminish that. But I would also say that the point that Obed has made on interest rate is very important. So I will expect the next, or I would hope that the next pragmatism to be shown by the central bank will be on that level, will be to do whatever is necessary to make access to credit easy for small-scale companies. Because the lack of access to credit is actually hurting jobs in this country. Because in many, many economies, it is very well established fact that the bulk of the jobs are created by small scale businesses.
Okay, Professor Onwudiwe, we will look at the indices that are expected to drive the growth, from the different sectors presently. My question is to Mr. Booker, Kiari Booker in Maiduguri, and this question is, prompted by the question of credibility that has, been raised severally, even in the course of our program, about the credibility of some of these international, ratings, like, of course, the IMF, Fitch, and, of course, the World Bank and all that, against the NBS, projections. And I'd like you to talk to us about that, again, against the background of Nigeria's population growth, which is, if I'm not mistaken, it's about 3%.
Quantification is such a has become an interesting science, if you will. Now, when you look at the numbers of the various agencies you've quoted, it is somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 2.5, which means that there is a variation of about 20%. And I believe that that is what we might probably see. I would like to also see our local analysts, such as Economic Associates and the rest of our people, including Nigerian Economic Summit Group, to come out with their own projections for the 2018 year. Now, what I see happening is that, and this is a personal position again, what I see is a projection that is usually a band. I wouldn't give an absolute number. I would say probably going to be between X and Y. And then it's based on some key assumptions, assuming that we do not pass the budget early enough, oil prices recede or whatever, the growth projection would be towards the bottom end of those numbers. If everything just works in our favor, the sun is shining, the tides are everything, the stars are all aligned, then what you would see would be towards the top end. Now, having said all of that, 2% or 2.5% GDP growth for an economy like Nigeria is not a rosy projection. Of course, from where we're coming from in 2017, it appears so, because we started the year, the first quarter of 2017, with a huge negative growth. Therefore, a 2 point some, an above 2% GDP growth would be encouraging or would be embraced, because where we are standing from now, we will love to see a growth of beyond that 2% or 2.5%, 3.5% or whatever. Now, for that to happen, things just have to all align in our favor. And by the way, as a nation, we must create our luck. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen with wishful thinking. It doesn't happen by talking. It happens when you do some of those things. The ease of doing business move that we have had is fantastic. And by the way, access to credit was the one that jumped the most. Interest rates are still high, but just the fact that businesses can even have the access to capital means a lot in an economy where the rate of return on investments can go above 30%. However, as Dr. Mailafia had mentioned and the other speakers have brought about, the inflation rate need to be tamed. For the inflation rate need to go down to a certain level. However, the interest rate, the MRR, the MPR rate, we need to start looking at easing those so that credit availability and the price or the cost of money can come down significantly. What I have seen in some of my other positions is that people are now reaching out to raising equity capital, venture capital, and of course the CBN's intervention in such things as the Anchor Borrower Program and the like are all contributing to small, medium enterprises getting access to capital in one form or the other. Because what you find is that people are now having a recourse to self-funding, meaning friends, family, and fools, right? For most of the early startups, especially in the technology field and thereabouts. However, there has to be a government policy towards that. What that will bring about would be what I call thousands and thousands of points of lights all across the country, all facing in the same direction, all growing, and therefore it impacts job creation and by so affects the growth rate in a very positive and faster manner. So the growth in GDP will be dictated by the policy position and, as the Minister of National Planning pointed out, the implementation of the ERGP, and it would be with a sense of urgency. I keep stressing that because as a country, we say certain things, the follow-through and following up becomes the major challenge that we face when it comes to economic matters. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Kyari Buka. Would love to now bring in Dr. Ayo Teriba. Well, as you also give us your projections for 2018, two things we have said brought us out of recession and brought us to the point where we are now, and that's the oil sector and the agricultural sector. How much do you see other sectors also contributing to the economy in 2018?
Right. The growth driver before the recession was the non-oil sector, particularly the service sector and agriculture in particular. Well, the recession was a liquidity shock, was a forex scarcity trouble that dragged, more or less all of the sectors down. And graciously, in 2017, we've seen that liquidity position improve. We are starting 2018 with external reserves of about $40 billion, in contrast to 25 billion at the end, the last quarter of 2016. Now, reserves position had increased steadily over the last 5 quarters. And as long as, the conversation about oil price, oil production, as long as oil price holds up, and oil production holds up, the reserves position would mean that all sectors will have adequate access, plus the CBN intervention, would have adequate access to forex, and you can expect that broadly based growth should return in 2018. The points made about interest rates coming down is very vital, and the positive issue about 2018 is that we reserves us at $40 billion, and with the likelihood of further increase, you should expect that liquidity improvement to rub off on interest rates, because the main constraint on the ability of the central bank to cut the interest rate was the likely backlash on the foreign exchange market in the absence of adequate foreign exchange supply. We are moving out of that, tight zone. We are moving towards a situation where that the country has sufficient, capacity to meet foreign exchange demand. And if you ease the monetary policy rate, is not likely to have any backlash, because the Naira itself has been strengthening very strongly. So my expectation is that as long as the positive condition in the oil sector holds up, we are likely to see improvements in credit availability, and we are likely to see a situation from the end of the first quarter into the second quarter where interest rates could come down and stay down, particularly given the fact that inflation has eased and is most likely to ease even more in the first quarter of this year. So the expectation is that as long as we don't have fresh troubles with oil price or oil production, 2018 should see further improvements in all economic indices. And also, Mr. Kiari has mentioned the budget. The key aspect, of the 2018 budget is that most of the assumptions are very favorable. Assumptions about growth, about exchange rate, about the oil price. We are choosing a benchmark that is much lower than the price that we are likely to realize, with implications for ability of the government to fund the budget. So the government's capacity to fund the budget is likely to be better in 2018. So on the whole, we've seen improvements in 2017. We are likely to see further improvements in 2018, bearing fresh shocks, to either the global oil price or the domestic oil production.
All right, Dr. Teriba, thank you again. We've looked at the various areas that these projections, of course, growth projections, might, of course, be sustained. But Nigeria, Dr. Malaifia, still enjoys the OPEC gratis, in quotes, till March. And right now we're seeing a widening, margin between the $45 per barrel projection and the current price of oil. Now, what other fiscal and monetary stimuluses do you think government might inject into the non-oil sector, which is, of course, the area that a lot of Nigerians are looking forward to support this growth?
Well, yes. I mean, that would be very important. I mean, mining, for example, solid minerals and mining, we need to see more activity in that sector. We need to see more injection of capital and resources. Of course, some of the issues have to do with the legal environment of that particular sector. The minerals belong to the federal government. The land is the prerogative of the governors, and they're unable to reconcile. So those kind of legal institutional issues need to be cleared so that, the whole sector can be released to create more wealth. And of course, manufacturing. I have always, insisted that we must industrialize. We have no choice. For a country of almost 200 million people, and you don't have a vibrant industrial sector, that is the only way you're going to generate the wealth and the jobs that can absorb this army of millions of young people who are, waiting, who need jobs and must have jobs. Otherwise, we're in very serious trouble. But if I may add, there are a few blind spots that we hardly look at in this kind of discourse that we are doing today. And for example, we lament inability to implement our programs. But the truth, the simple truth, is that no matter how excellent the policies that the president comes up with, no matter how brilliant the policy ideas that are propounded, you need the civil service to implement. And you will agree with me that the civil service of today is not like the civil service of those days. We had one of the best civil service administrations in the whole of Commonwealth of Nations. Today, the civil service has been in decay, and nobody talks about it, and yet, without that machinery of bureaucracy, we won't be able to implement the policies, no matter how novel, no matter how brilliant. That is the first aspect. The second aspect is the almost virtual absence of rural administration. The French, where I had some of my education, would tell you that nous sommes tous des paysans. We are all peasants. We live in the countryside. That's where we came from. They give very, very careful attention to rural administration. In this country, with the virtual hijacking of local government by the states, there's no more rural administration. That is why there's no authority in the rural areas. Banditry, clashes between farmers and herdsmen and the rest of it. All of this is going on. Just, New Year's Eve, my local government, the chief, before crossover, was about to go to church for crossover. They went and slaughtered him with his wife.
Yes, we had
that.
We had that.
So I know. Well, it is important because this absence of effective administration at the grassroots is hampering peace, is hampering agriculture. If we had peace, agriculture would have been completely transformed. So these are issues we need to look at. And then lastly, if you don't mind.
Yes, just quickly, because we need to take a short break.
Okay. That is 2018 is also the electoral political cycle. There will be huge pressures because there's going to be more spending by politicians.
We're going to come to that because that's going to have a lot of impact on the economy.
Sure.
That's this year. It's an election year next year. A lot of pressure, and we're going to look at how much impact that would have on our growth. Well, we'll take a short break now, and when we come back, a lot more issues to talk on the economy. You're still watching Good Morning Nigeria. We'll be back shortly.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Chief. Good morning, sir. You're here already?
No, now my spirit day, my body day for house. What kind of question is that? Were you not the one that fixed this meeting for 8 a.m.? You are now coming by 10 a.m. and start asking me job questions.
But Chief, now, I'm sorry. Don't you also go late for meetings sometimes? You know now, African time.
No more African time. And no more pancaking of face during office hours. At the end of the day, we will lose valuable time. We will not make progress. If we want to move this nation forward, we must treat business as business and respect time. Change begins with me.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. Can we go for the meeting now, Chief?
Later.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, and our focus has been on the economic outlook for Nigeria in 2018. Of course, Dr. Obadiah Lafia, Dr. Ayo Teriba, and Professor Onwudiwe, and of course, Kiari Buka. They've all been speaking to the growth, the projections for 2018. And just before the break, Dr. Obadiah Lafia was also speaking to other sectors like the mining sector and how much it could contribute to our growth this year. But then one improvement we saw this last year was the exchange rate. As of January 2017, a dollar to naira was about 525. But by the end of this year, we saw its gain and, of course, was stable at 360. Are we likely to see more gain with the naira, and of what impact would this have on the economy this year?
Well, if the projections all come true, that the economy will actually grow, then I would expect the naira to gain some strength. And if it does, it means that the exchange rate will be quite favorable. But the situation with the Naira is...
But you also need the stabilization of the Naira to grow the economy. So it's a two-way thing.
Well, yes, of course, yes. But, as I say, the monetary policy that will guide that, I can trust. The problem we have been having with the issue of the exchange rate is that it has been in such multiple rates that everybody has been saying that's not very good, But I think that the situation of our economy is what we would look at first before we deal with the exchange rate to our satisfaction. Because the value of any country's currency is mostly dependent on its productivity. And therefore, a good economic policy that encourages higher productivity would naturally bring our exchange rate to a comfortable zone. And I think that some of those policies that will increase the productivity of this country would be from the agricultural sector. And a policy that I would like to see in that sector is from the fiscal side rather than from the monetary side. And that fiscal policy that I would hope to see is guaranteed pricing, guaranteed prices for agricultural products. Our farmers need to know that what they produce can be sold. And because of lack of investment in storages, in rural roads, I think somebody talked about rural administration, and I think that's a very, very important point, because if you delink administration from the economy, you would have bad growth. And if we can actually have access roads, feeder roads for farmers, and storages for them to put their products, a lot of wastage that is quite discouraging to the farming business will not be taking place. And so what I think should happen is what they do in so many other countries, in so many developed countries, is they make sure their farmers' labor does not go in vain. They guarantee to buy products from them at prices that they expect. And I think that will be a very important addition to increasing the general productivity that will now help in putting an even kill on our forex.
Okay, because Professor Onwudiwe, thank you. Well, we didn't know that, as they say in philosophy, theory without practice is blind, and practice without theory is empty. Both fiscal and monetary policies, do go hand in hand to grow our economy. But again, let's get to Lagos Network Center, where Dr. Ayo Teriba is. Again, let's look at the unemployment figure as released by NBS, as well as the inflation figure. Both of them are still, maintaining double digits, 18.8 and 15.9 or thereabout percent. And Mr. Kyari talked about the need for urgent implementation of the ERGP. How might this stimulate employment and of course, reduce inflation?
Thanks very much. Much of these variables are interrelated. I mean, in the face of recession, you expect a worsening of employment. And as growth resumes, you expect, that will impact employment positively with a lag. So we are discussing coming from negative growth into slightly positive growth, and most projections is putting our growth at or above 2% for 2018. That will rub off positively on employment. Inflation, the main shock, the main source of inflation for Nigeria was the devaluation of the Naira. And we've acknowledged the fact that over the last 1 year, the Naira itself had strengthened, from the very scary region of 500 or more in early 2016 to about 360, now. And that's has explained the steady decline we've seen in inflation. And I believe that the consensus, of Dr. Melafia, Professor Onwudiwe, and Mr. Kiari Buka is that much of the improvements that we've seen in 2017 will continue. And I like, the earlier question about can we find an extra gear, to, push growth faster, which Dr. Melafia had explained. I'd like to say yes, that Nigeria can find an extra gear. We've spoken about fiscal policy, we've spoken about monetary policy, in particular, interest rates coming down, more credit becoming available. What we have not spoken about, which I think is very important in the Nigerian story today, given that Nigeria is Africa's largest economy, the largest population you can find anywhere in Africa, Middle East, or Europe, is that we shouldn't be pushing the Nigerian issue with Nigeria's resources alone. There are opportunities, for tinkering with the foreign investment policy and attracting additional inflows. With improvement in oil price and production, we see reserves at $40 billion. With a bit of opening up sectors that are currently, under government monopoly to foreign investment, like we have achieved in LNG and in telecoms. If you could open power transmission, to foreign equity ownership, if you could open rail. I mean, the president listed an impressive list of sectors, where government of rail links in the country. My key issue is we could move faster if we could open that rail sector itself to foreign investment. That we've lost money from the fall in oil price. We've lost foreign exchange income from the fall in oil price. We need foreign exchange from non-export sources, non-debt sources, and equity, across infrastructure sectors. I think is the extra gear that we could engage that we boost growth. I'm glad that the panel, the contributors have emphasized the role of the stability of the exchange rate. And we also had made clear that the reserves now at 40, you need reserves improving steadily. But reserves is about foreign exchange liquidity. Without adequate reserve, you can't guarantee stability of the naira. Without stability of the naira, you can't guarantee growth. You can't guarantee stable inflation. You can't guarantee interest rates coming down. So an additional source of increase in reserves is foreign, investment reform. And we need to be a bit proactive about it, open more of the sectors and get the dollars coming in their billions so that we can guarantee the sustainability of growth and stability.
Rhoda. Stay with Dr. Teriba. A lot of people have questioned CBN's continued intervention, with the forex market and the impact that might have on, investors' confidence. Now, going forward in 2018, do you think that there should be liberalization of the forex market?
Right. One has to also, understand, where the Central Bank of Nigeria was coming from. The ability, of the Central Bank to maintain stability in the foreign exchange sector is dependent on the amount of foreign exchange supply available. We've said October 2016, reserves dropped to about $25 billion. That was a very difficult situation to have been in. And the central bank responded to that critical supply shortage situation by those restrictions they announced, and then creating, different windows to acknowledge the fact that not everybody can get the forex, and they prioritized, users or buyers that were critical to recovery. But where we are today, we are at about $40 billion in reserves. It's much better than the situation we were in the last quarter of 2016. The central bank has been increasingly able to bring more, supply to the table to meet more demand. So I am saying that we should focus on that level of reserves. 40 is a comfortable situation to be in. $50 billion will be even a more comfortable situation to be in, and we shouldn't be waiting for oil export. We could attract foreign equity investment. When equity arrives, they don't leave. When you get debt, it will one day leave, and you have to pay to service it. You don't service equity. Equity arrives and it stays forever. So I'm saying boost that foreign exchange supply, will boost the ability of the central bank to meet demand and, retain the confidence of investors, both domestic and foreign. That actually is the key point. That in addition to our conversation about fiscal policy, our conversation about monetary policy, we also need to speak about the need for a proactive investment policy, not just foreign borrowing, but attracting and retaining, large sums of foreign equity inflows. That's my key point.
Teriba, I'd like to bring in Buka Kiari, and that was an issue you were speaking to earlier on. That's the ratings now on our ease of doing business. You were speaking to it earlier, and how do we relate that? Just what Mr. Ayo said, the issue of investors' confidence, getting them to invest and retaining them. And very quickly, as you speak to that, 2018 is here. What impact would that have on the economy?
Thank you, Rhoda. It's a critical piece for any country, and we don't live in an isolation. We cannot shut the doors and windows and think that we could survive on our own. It's never like that. We need to reach out, and how you reach out is by having investor-friendly policies. So the ease of doing business is going to be one of those key factors. If I bring in my money, is it welcomed? That's the thinking of the average foreign investor. And mind you, every foreign investor that is looking at coming into Nigeria, they also have options of going elsewhere. And the key for them to make the decision to come into Nigeria is on the friendliness or the welcoming of those investments. And how do you welcome a foreign investor's money? You do that by some of the things that had been shared by Dr. Ayo Teriba and some of the other speakers. That is that you have to have a clear, transparent investment policy where when your money comes in and it's ready to go leave, it will leave. When your money comes in, there are no funny change of the rules in the middle of the game. And so the ease of doing business is one of such factors. And I see that the rest of the world have actually given us credit as one of the top 10 reformers, globally speaking, on the ease of doing business. Now, then we now talk about the other issues. And those are issues that are related to whether it is going to be the debt or the equity. Of course, naturally, I would love to see a lot of equity investments coming in, because when you come in, they not only bring their money, they also bring in their expertise. And it is the reason why I want to attract equity investors is that they could also see the opportunity of the huge population base, the demographic dividend, and how that can then be looked at as and mined mining of that opportunity space. And so with a government posture that is very friendly and the atmosphere of ease of doing business, whether it is registering, paying my taxes or whatever, all of those play a significant role. And I am quite amused at the fact that in a discussion about the Nigerian economy, the ugly C word had not even come up, which is very interesting. The issue of corruption and the likes, because those are some of the perceptions seen by people that are outside of the country. I have, in the last 12 months, I have visited a number of countries where we have discussed about doing business with Nigeria. And in most cases, the issues of insecurity and the issues of ease of doing business or friendliness of the posture of government are discussed significantly without necessarily bringing up the corruption issue. And the reason is that, of course, with the persona of Mr. President, there is that belief that that is going to be, the leakages have been blocked, things are going on. However, we also need to pay attention to the execution. By that I mean the conclusion of whatever investigation that gets started that is linked to corruption, and we should be seen to be dealing with them fairly and also firmly when it comes to those issues. And it gives an encouraging, warm feeling to a foreign investor that is holding on to their money and that are looking at whether they should come into Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, or somewhere else in the world. So I do believe very strongly that being investor-friendly is not a lip service. It's not something that you just talk about. It's something that you do, and you also show that you are passing the necessary laws. Because when we started this quest on ease of doing business, NESG 2 summits ago shared that with government, and better late than never. Things have improved significantly. I believe that a year ago, when Mr. President attended the summit, he also gave charge that we need to improve on the ease of doing business. And so 2017 was a vindication of that. And I think we just need to, as Dr. Teriba said, crank up the gear, push, and move at a faster speed. Because the sense of urgency is very important. And also when we have that open, transparent, and encouraging and welcoming of foreign investors, both on the equity and the debt side. By the way, one other aspect of the debt side is that for the first time, we had a long-term bond, 30-year, that was oversubscribed. I think some of those paths need to be explored, because our initial concerns beginning of this 2017 was that the sustainability of the debt. If you have 30-year money or 40-year money at a very low interest rate, then that could give a breathing space in terms of the debt service ratio. Meanwhile, the money borrowed or the bond issued should then go to the critical aspects of the economy, such as infrastructure, as Mr. President highlighted in his speech yesterday. Rail, road transport, water transport, powers, especially power. I've seen a tweet by Richard Branson where he said the profit in Nigeria for the next 10 years is in the order of hundreds of billions of dollars if one goes into sustainable, renewable energy, such as off-grid power. And we have seen that happen. In the last 1 year, there has been over 1.5 million installations of off-grid solar power in the country. And those are not even the statistics that is being used when people talk about the power consumption or power production in the economy. So those are some of the critical catalysts that will give us that boost in the GDP growth. Thank you.
Dr. Buka Kiari, thank you for those for your response. Of course, we know that Dr. Melafia, has a response to, of course, our other question to Dr. Ayo Teriba, but Dr. Melafia will come to you presently. We've got tweets coming in. Some of them have been screening on the screen. Of course, let's take this first one from Raji. Raji says, I expected our great president, Muhammadu Buhari, to talk on bogus salary increments. Most importantly, massive employment and retirement of the old people in the workforce. But we didn't see anything like that. May God prolong his life and give him good health. We shall vote you again.
And Mahmoud Hammond's tweet says, economic outlook for 2018 may not be bright unless the business environment of Nigeria is radically transformed in terms of security of persons and property in urban and rural areas. Activities of ethnic militia and bandits as in Zamfara, Kaduna, Mambila, Plateau, Rivers, is inimical to the country.
And Jibril Naina tweets, this year, or rather, this is year of prosperity. Our committed, amiable president has said it, and we believe Nigeria's economy will be better than ever.
Aminu Gubai, to his tweets, it says, well, like what Mr. President had said, I think the youth should wake up from their slumber. I've seen huge potentials in our youth whom I believe can turn hard into light. I think what the youths need is stimuli and motivation.
And Judum Ali tweets, the government should do something towards policies that will increase access to funding businesses across all sectors.
And Jibril Inaina tweets again, is that if agriculture had been given attention as the oil sector gets, Nigeria would have been the world's leading economy.
And Mutana Farouk tweets, the economic indices of the developed nations are apparently traceable to the indigenous ideas and policies. I urge this administration to concentrate on the local policies that are relatively friendly to the poor masses. This can trigger the sustainable economic growth.
And finally, Donatus Abo tweets, it says civil service in Nigeria should be radically changed. Voluntary and compulsory redundancy should be considered to get young people that have modern skills and easier to adapt to change. Those are the tweets that we have right now. You can continue to tweet at us at NTAGMN. Dr. Obadiah Milafia, I actually paused you on the issue of 2019 and 2018 being a political year. You can't take that away. And how much impact do you see that having on our economic growth this year?
Well, I think it will also simply mean that we'll see more Naira floating all over the place, because when you are moving towards electioneering, there's a lot of political horse trading, there's a lot of spending, there's a lot of carrying about of Ghana must go bags. So we're likely to see a lot of that after the second quarter. And that means that also there will be more pressure on inflation and on prices generally, because when you have too much money about, it's likely to impact negatively on prices in terms of higher prices. So we're likely to see a bit of that. And I wanted to just react also to what my good friend Alam Guru Kyari said about investment. Very important, I think very important, but I'm not a great fan of equity investments, to be very honest. In the context of Nigeria, what we need is foreign direct investment. We cannot gear a whole economic system. And it seems as if our monetary system, our investment policies are all geared towards bringing in some of these equity investors. I'm not against them for the sake of being against them. If I had to choose between type of investor, I would say go for foreign direct investors, people who bring their knowledge, their capital, their resources, their experiences, their global networks to invest in this country for the long haul. For example, when the Chinese were negotiating with Ethiopia to build a railway, the Ethiopians said, no, don't bring us any coaches, we don't want that. Come here, we're giving free land. Here is the land, set up the factory here, build the coaches here, build the engines here, train our people on how to use them, and together let's lay out the rail tracks and develop the Ethiopian rail industry. I see in my vision fast trains, Lagos, Abuja. Some people, you can have trains that can go over 300 kilometers, which means people can literally live in Lagos, walk in Abuja, and go back. You can do it in 2.5 hours. The Chinese now have maglev trains.
Rhoda is looking at you.
That is true. No. The Chinese have invented maglev trains that go over 700 kilometers.
Indeed.
We in this country need to wake up. We have the people, we have the young men, we have the young women, we have talent in this country, we have entrepreneurs. Let's mobilize them.
Dr. Milafia, will pause you. Let's bring in Professor Onwudiwe finally. Looking at budget implementation, The 2018 budget is still being scrutinized by the Parliament National Assembly. How might the delay affect, growth?
Well,
very brief.
Yes, with respect to budgets, since 2000, since our new independence, since Obasanjo, we have never completed implementation of any budget. And we have never come together to creatively find out why this is the problem. And so I expect that problem to repeat, because there has not been any thought given to it. Year in, year out, every budget is not implemented. I think Yaradua tried to do something about it, but didn't live to see it through. So we do have the problem of implementation, and I think that is going to hamper the budget. I hope we learn and make sure that this doesn't repeat too badly and reflect on the economic hopes that we are entertaining.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Onwudiwe. Very quickly, Dr. Teriba and Buka Kyari, very, very quickly, we're winding down. Nigeria's stock market was ranked amongst one of the best, at least the top 5 in 2017. Very quickly, what was responsible for this, and what do you hope to see in this year? Dr. Teriba, very quickly, very quickly.
2016, as the Naira weakened throughout that year, the stock market declined, which meant that money fled Nigeria. It started in 2015 and continued in 2016. With improvements that we've acknowledged in the Naira in 2017, with improvement in reserves position, the stock market is back up. More than 40% growth in market capitalization in 2017. So it says to you that improvements, in key economic variables like exchange rate and reserves and inflation and growth attracts investment into the stock market. And that's, partly, the conversation we were having about, the equity. The outlook, for 2018 is that as long as the Naira remains strong, as long as reserve position is strong, then you should expect more deepening, not just of the stock market, but of the banking system and also of the bond markets.
All right, Dr. Teriba, thank you. Mr. Buka Kyari, what do you say very briefly in less than 60 seconds?
I think in a very short remark, it is basically the availability of FX and the posture of the central bank contributed significantly. And of course, the market had been going down prior to that as a result of the liquidity squeeze. Now, the other thing that I had mentioned, which is the equity investment, I don't mean the investment in stock market. I mean investment in businesses. As an investor that will come in and buy into, say, NTA and privatize it, and that's an equity investment rather than a debt investment, et cetera, et cetera. So what I mean by equity investment is investors that come in for the long haul, not the hot money that may come in today and 2 quarters later they would leave. So I think we are on the same page with Dr. Mailafia on that.
Thank you very much for your concluding remarks. You joined us from Maiduguri Network Center. Mr. Buka is Chairman, Nigeria Economic Summit Group. Thank you. I'd also like to appreciate from Lagos Network Center, Dr. Ayo Teriba, a very familiar face here on our program, Chief Executive Officer of Economic Associates. Many thanks to you.
Very much.
And our friend and probably GMN analyst, in-house analyst, that's Dr. Badaya Mailafia, former Deputy Governor at the Central Bank of Nigeria. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we also like to appreciate Professor Ebere Onwudiwe, who is, of course, a retired professor of political economist. Many thanks to you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, that does it in our discussion segment. Very quickly, let's get to find out what the weather outlook for today, the second day of the year 2018, would be like.